This is where I start to struggle, right? Oswin, I recommend pulling up descriptions of behavior in disordered attachment in children. Will do. I'm going to search that up now. Characteristics of disordered attachments. Oswin, help me out here. Why? All right, let's look this up while I look this up. Okay. So we look at attachment. Let's take a look at apparently the characteristics of disordered attachment in children are they're struggling with academic, social, emotional, and behaviorally, and such like that. All right, I am not 100% sure what this link. I'm going to probably figure it out as I talk. So going back to the original point, right, with PDA versus ODD, to me, and this is coming, and this is coming to, and this is 100% me coming from like me being Black and me growing up Black and seeing what it looks like. PDA and ODD are literally just the same thing, just being said in different terms. All right. So let's see. Is it evolved learned behavior? Most situations of behavior are due to those getting what they want. Fair. So like with PDA and ODD, it's just literally the same thing to me. Literally the same thing to me, just framed differently. Oppositional defiance. Keep in mind, oppositional defiance disorder is 5 times as likely to be diagnosed in Black boys, Black and African American boys, and Caribbean American boys in the United States, at least, than it is in any other demographic. And as it is, Black children are often looked at as defiant when they don't subscribe to things. It sounds like the difference is the diagnosis assumptions of intent. That's what it feels like to me. Exactly. That's what it feels like. So subconsciously, I don't want to clean my trauma from childhood was freeze, keeping my head low. I thought PDA was just modern, better wording for ODD since Taya, that's exactly how I feel about it. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at mentally, right? That's exactly where I'm at about ODD, right? And PDA. That's why I said in my video that PDA is a whitewashed version of oppositional defiance disorder. All right? You get what I'm saying? Like that's where I'm at, right? It feels like a more palatable version of oppositional defiance disorder. It feels the same way as like highly sensitive person feels, right? Let's see. Would it be helpful to look up you could, like, attachment styles in children, image search might be better. Let me see. Attachment styles in children. Let me actually look that up, Oswin. Attachment styles in children. And then go to the images. All right. But yeah, a lot of the stuff when it comes to ODD and with oppositional defiance and such, right? To me, versus PDA, like I feel like it's been polished so people can say it. Yes, it's been polished so people can say it in a more PC way. Exactly. Like and that more PC, but I wouldn't even say PC. I would say more palatable way. A more palatable way for white children and white adults and white teenagers because of the connotation of ODD to Black and brown children and people of color, right? You know, very interesting question. I never thought about it like that. Yeah, no, I didn't think about it at first like that until I had a conversation with another mutual of mine, right? Very familiar to permissive parenting. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say it's familiar to permissive parenting at all. Because a lot of the time, like, I've worked with kids that were diagnosed with ODD. I've worked with kids who are autistic and want to be autonomous, especially in early childhood and stuff like that. And what I can safely tell you is, at least for me, what I can safely present to you is a lot of the time the parents are actively trying to be mindful and trying to be gentle with their parenting, giving choices, giving the children the opportunity to choose, giving the opportunity for being autonomous on their own. And it doesn't necessarily always work, because a lot of it is and again, this goes back to the PDA versus ODD that I read the motivation that I read specifically. PDA behaviors are driven by an anxiety and a need to avoid being controlled, while ODD behaviors are often about power struggles and expressing anger. The thing is, if you look at the term, if you look at that specifically, right? Isn't a power struggle essentially the need to avoid being controlled? Isn't there wouldn't you say that there is an anxiety, right? Is there a guide to how to be normal? What's normal? What is normal? I'm confused. What is normal? I don't believe in normal. Oh no, they tell me that because of my demographic, I need help, not whitewash BS eugenics for anxiety, for sure. I look at a power struggle as an anxiety and a need to regain control. That's how I look at it, right? It's like, oh, I'm fighting the struggle. I don't feel like I'm in control. It's a response to not being in control. It's a response to not being able to have my own locus of control. That I feel like everybody's trying to control me. The one thing when it comes to ODD is there's an anger component to it that's always added, right? It's an anger component. Like, we're shaming the emotion of anger towards it, right? That's what I look at. People don't go into fight mode when they're calm, equalizing behavior on both sides. Exactly. Like, you can feel that, you can see that. Exactly. And that's where I'm at, right? That's where I'm at right here, right? When it comes down to that. And this is where I feel that PDA, like PDA as a profile, is just another way to kind of distance yourself, or distance them, people trying to distance themselves from certain things. That's all. That's where I'm at. Like I said, if y'all want to join in the discussion, feel free. Tap the guest thing on the bottom. Respectfully, why is this a discussion in the first place? The answer is obviously no. The answer is not obviously no. Like, I'm gonna TLDR what I said earlier. Like, go ahead.
I think that we can say yes, it is, but we have to put in a positionality standpoint with this, so we can understand why it's a whitewashed version of it, and how we can see the differences in the way that children are approached if they are white versus how they are approached when they are black or brown, and how that then is what causes the kinds of responses we get to then end up having the prettier version of the same damn thing of us being traumatized and only having so many ways of communicating that.
So I have neither. So I'm not a PDA profile. I don't have ODD. None of that, right? I don't have any, I am ADHD 100%. I have ADHD, right? And so when the question is Osmond pointed out the positionality and stuff like that. When I spoke about the key differences between what PDA and ODD are, what's essentially discussed is that PDA behaviors are driven by anxiety and a need to avoid feeling controlled, whereas ODD behaviors are often about power struggles and expressing anger. And I position the fact that power struggles are just another way to say the anxiety over feeling controlled.
To JC, it is not exclusive to autism, but you have to remember that autism gets its own language because we're special snowflakes that parents don't want to say we're anything like other people. Yeah.
It's essentially othering other people, right? In the same community, right? So we were saying, so like there's 4 attachment styles. Well, 2 attachment styles, but one of the attachment styles can be splintered off into 3 different attachment styles. So there's secure and insecure attachment, and right? Insecure attachment can be splintered off into avoidant, ambivalent, and disorganized attachment. So avoidant attachment, the general state of being of a child is essentially not very explorative, emotionally distant. The responsiveness, like they say the mothers, but it's also general responsiveness to signals and needs, distance, disengaged, and the fulfillment of child need is subconsciously believing that their needs probably won't be met. If I remember correctly, Oswin, we said that the avoidant attachment fits into what? That fits into
PDA.
PDA, right? Where they know their needs are not going to be met, where they're disengaged, and then, like there's some kind of a distance, right? A lot of ADHD symptoms are PTSD, CPTSD. Exactly. Like I have CPTSD, by the way. Like I'm letting you know right now, I have CPTSD. So like there's that too.
If I'm real, I don't like thinking about symptoms because symptoms are observable responses, which are not actually like what we are.
They put them in quotes.
All like neurological differences. And because these neurological differences are then when they interact with the world and then people interact back with us is how we then end up into our PTSD things. That's not to say that parents are causing autism. They're just causing the trauma responses.
The parents are causing the parents or their environment are causing the trauma responses that exacerbate these traits and stuff, right?
Well, I consider neurological traits autistic characteristics and then symptoms.
Yes.
So characteristics are going to be more of that broad interpretation based off of like culture and everything.
Fair. That's fair.
Whereas the neurological traits are the things that are actually happening in our brains to have us have the different responses in the first place.
Right. So we go to ambivalent attachment, anxious, insecure, angry, sometimes sensitive, sometimes neglectful, and they cannot rely on their needs being met. So that we said fits into our rejection sensitivity disorder. Now, disorganized attachment is depressed, angry, completely passive, non-responsive. Like the responsiveness to the signals and needs are extreme, erratic, frightened or frightening, passive or intrusive. And the why the child acts the way they act is they're severely confused with no strategy to have their needs met. We kind of reason that fits oppositional defiance disorder.
Because the reactions are because they don't even know that their needs can be met.
They're not aware of their needs.
Yeah. And no one is giving that direction. And then because what's also happening typically on the outside, if you look at what causes that, it is parents always being confrontational with the child and so forth, which you can really see mapped on or see how that happens within BIPOC families if you're from BIPOC families.
Yeah. Like Christina said, I think ODD is PDA, but just renamed to make POC look bad. I mean, ODD came first.
Correct. And PDA came out of the UK with young white girls.
Pretty much. So that's the thing. And that's why I strongly feel like PDA, the PDA quote unquote profile of autism is simply a whitewashed version of oppositional defiance disorder, which honestly I think shouldn't even be a diagnosis to begin with because it stigmatizes Black boys.
And then also what the PDA community originally said, which is even more why we can see it was whitewashed, they would say that kids with a PDA profile needed different responses than other autistic kids. The behavioral things that we do with autistic kids are bad for all autistic kids. It's not unique to the PDA kids, but they were trying to separate out that they should have different services than every other autistic kid because they needed different. However, that's then when we get into the permissive parenting and because we're not dealing with the dysregulation that is causing the trauma in the first place to be avoidant in the first place, we just continue to not meet the needs and then only meet their advances for control.
So, Saber, I'm gonna just quickly catch you on this one. If your partner has CPTSD, they're also neurodivergent, because again, it is a change in the neurological function in the brain, right? So keep that in mind. That's also neurodivergent. So like all that to say, it's like,
Tina, that is inaccurate as well. We are just using more of our brains because it's not it's not filtering the stuff out. This is not the same thing. It's just not filtering all the sensory information out.
Again, it goes back to executive dysfunctioning. So like yesterday I was talking about ADHD and temporal myopia, right? Where like ADHD people don't necessarily have a sense of time, or the sense of time that everybody else has, right? Then with this one, it's like, it's not because of the demands of capitalism. Like Tina, like that is 100% incorrect. 100%
It would
incorrect.
happen even if it weren't under capitalism. It would happen even if we weren't under capitalism.
Children are not under the tip of capitalism. They're not. Let's keep it real. Like, especially in early childhood, they're not under the tip of capitalism. But just the sheer demands of them every day, like you can scale demands. You can scale the demands of it, like to wherever it is. You know what I mean? So like, most neurodivergent disorders are holistic and acquired through trauma. Multiple. Okay, you said most. Okay, I was about to dunk on you real quick when it came to like Alzheimer's.
You are not wrong, JC. You are not wrong.
Like, I was about to dunk on you real quick. I was like, wait, you said most. You said most. Hold on. You said most. So I'm like, all right, say less. No worries. All right, gotcha. Yeah. I wasn't gonna come at you real quick.
Tina, can we be real? I need to. I'm sorry. I have to do this. You
gonna burst?
No. I'm gonna explain.
Right.
Tina, you are taking what's happening under capitalism,
Peace.
And fine. Bye.
It's not misinformed, baby. You just don't agree. Like, and that's okay.
Oh,
that's the point, baby. That's the point. You don't gotta agree with me.
I mean, Chinese kids are not living under capitalism, and they're still autistic.
I mean, dude, this Finnish kids. And
there's people in authoritarian and liberal and like autistic people are everywhere.
Facts. I'm gonna say it again.
Has nothing to do with capitalism.
Children are not under the tip of capitalism. Like when you look at children, they don't have to worry about what capitalism has to do with that stuff like that.
I mean, once they enter school, they do in school.
Like, early childhood. I would say like before kindergarten. Kindergarten. All right. Before
school.
Yeah. So wait. You're saying, I just got here, PDA is based in trauma and more over parental caused trauma?
I'm not going to go parental caused, because that's not accurate either. Because does anybody here know anything about the double empathy problem? Because I might need to explain that before I start.
Explain it. I'm vaguely familiar with it, but I'm not familiar with enough with it to like actually express it.
Okay, double empathy problems. Neurotypical people and neurotypical people can't relate to us because we do not have the same experiences to be able to understand each other. That includes facial expressions. That includes body language. That includes language and all these things. We have documented evidence that neurotypical people can't read our facial expressions or our body language or understand what we're saying. They misunderstand what we say a lot.
And then the flip side to that, we can't read theirs because quote unquote, because
what's going to happen to a parent who is autistic with an autistic child who can't read their body signals? Are they going to be able to meet that child's needs?
Absolutely the fuck not.
That is not their fault. It is not they haven't caused that.
It's unintentional.
That doesn't mean that child is not still recognizing that their needs are not being met. Their needs are still not being met. Either way.
Yeah, and you still gooped? I got you gooped, bro. Like, the public school system, it could be. I mean, the public school system is just like, ish. You know, school in general is the way school is the school is structured. But
you
when it
see
comes down
PDA
to it,
profiles going as far back as 18 months. But that is because needs are not being met. You cannot, you become avoidant when your needs are not being met. This is why we look at the attachment styles.
So keep in mind, so let's go back. We know that autism can be detected in children as young as 18 months, right? We can see, or 2 years. 9? Well, okay, let's go with the standard. Let's go with the industry standard. Well, let's go with industry standard 12 months. All right. So we're gonna go with 12 months, right? So as early as a year, you can see autistic. You can see autistic behaviors, autistic traits, however you want to call them, in a child, in an infant and early childhood, and infant toddler, right? We can see that. That can be seen. That is easily observable. I'm gonna add 2 people. Because I got.
Here's the thing. I don't know if I love your username, Thick McGiggles. Yes, absolutely. What a username. We love it. I don't know if you're asking specifically for this profile of essentially ADHD plus autism with externalizing behavioral traits and a low frustration tolerance, which we would shorthand to PDA, for example, in this situation. I don't know if you're asking for that. I think about when we get this profile of learner through the public education system, we have 4 different options that end up happening. They're not all equally good and none of them are perfect. One is that we end up figuring out a plan and a placement for this child with a lot of support, usually with a lot of co-regulation, right? So children need co-regulate. They need almost an external emotional regulation system through someone who's going to help them throughout the day, modify materials, modify their schedule, provide them a lot of movement breaks. And by modify material, I mean engage with them genuinely about things that they're interested in, and not just with the schools do this paper or whatever. That's not going to be helpful. They're not going to be able to activate their interest and show how capable they are if we do that. Right. That's option 1. Usually that does involve an additional staffer and a behavior intervention plan. 2, a lot of these families end up getting pushed out to homeschooling. That in of its own has its problems for all the reasons, and families can't sustain that financially, right?
Right.
3, outplacement schools. A lot of times these kids get placed to outplacement schools because we can't deal with them, quote unquote. That's what the district said. We can't deal with it. We can't deal with them. Have they actually tried to learn? No, absolutely not. And when they go to these outplacement schools, it's usually you either get really, really lucky with a staff that's compassionate and willing to learn, or it's just more ABA. And we just tried that already. So this is not working for a student who's burnt out, who needs a lot of autonomy and needs a lot lower demands while their nervous system is resetting. And then 4th, the child is entered into the carceral system. So those are the 4 outcomes that are most frequently seen. And this is broken down, of course, by race and class always. In terms of ASL, what?
Always.
Yeah. And then in terms of ASL, part of it is because with this profile of learner, right? We believe, again, this student, usually we only address, for whatever reason, we only believe that pathological demand avoidance or pervasive demand for autonomy only applies to students who are mouth speaking, meaning verbal. For some reason, we don't address it that way, and we don't see the needs of non-speaking, unreliable speech or complex communicators. We don't see them as pathologically demand avoidant or pervasively demanding autonomy, which is also ableism, because assuming that anything other than anxiety and sensory overload is at the core of all of our students' behavior is really messed up. It's the environment that's creating the behavior, not the child creating the behavior organically. So,
facts.
Amash, this was actually one of my first arguments against PDA way back in the day, 2016, when this was popping up so widely at first, that the Aspie supremacy of it has always been an undercurrent of it, because it has always been about not being, or about the fact that these kids need different supports because they're speaking and the roots of their behaviors are different than those of everyone else, and like that part is far more in line with some of the early things I really feel like were the cause of them having this profile in the first place, because it did come out of the UK, which means that we didn't have the same racial components that we did here.
That's correct.
Right.
That is correct.
Now,
it's the other way around. I said that ODD is a racist version of PDA. That is what I said.
Tony, ODD is actually overdiagnosed in black and brown boys. Very overdiagnosed. About, I want to say 4 times as much.
I can touch on it.
Get it.
Because in the school systems in America, any misbehavior by anyone who is not white is viewed as aggressive. And therefore, ODD is the one that they look for, not anything like PDA, not autism, not any trauma. They just assume that misbehavior is aggression. And so they throw ODD at them. And it's BS. It's absolute BS. They don't look for any other alternative. They basically throw a dart at a dartboard, and the dartboard only has one thing on it. They don't look for any trauma in the home. They don't look for societal factors. They just throw this, what they think is a fancy title at them that's going to follow them for the rest of their lives.
Correct. And here's the thing about working in special education, right? For
it is
whatever year I'm in now, is like, when I look at an IEP, when I look at a behavior plan, when I look at an FBA, and it says defiant, it says dangerous, I want to know the exact definition. Is it hitting? Is it spitting? Is it throwing? Is it cussing? Is it eloping? Is it eloping out the building? Is it just eloping out into the hallway? Is it breaking things? Is it stabbing? Is it threatening to, like, I need the actual definition of the behavior, because schools will just say non-compliance, work refusal, defiant, and those are very subjective terms. You know what's not subjective? Student hit self in the face when distressed.
I mean,
except in one case where a black child was adopted by a white family, be diagnosed, which again, I don't know how the diagnosis works, because what are you basing it off of? But the only children I've ever seen have a PDA label where the neuropsychologist is saying, this is an autistic child with PDA profile in the report, are white affluent children of means. I'm not hating on these families. I just think it's interesting that they're able to access this label that provides a lot of empathy, that provides a very different perspective. And ODD just is like, oh, you're a problem. You are a problem. And that is very, very, again, when I work in schools, and Title I schools, 10 out of 12 of my years of being a special educator, and I've never seen a single child who's labeled ODD get a PDA label anywhere, or anyone even bring it up, until I started working in a very affluent white school. That is a major problem.
And then we're going to go even further with this. Diagnoses of ODD or conduct disorder are not eligible for disability accommodation at schools under the IDEA. When parents request accommodation for a diagnosed disorder which is eligible, such as ADHD, the request can be denied on the basis such conditions are comorbid with ODD. This bias in perception and diagnoses leads to defiant behaviors being medicalized and rehabilitated in white children, but criminalized in Latino and African American, Caribbean American.
I thought that ODD ended up going into emotional disturbance when you went into public education. Am I wrong on that, Mush?
You are correct. It goes,
okay.
but I argue, and this is the thing, and if you know me, you know me, I do not allow any of my clients and any of my students historically, and this is very close to like 1,000 kids at this point, to ever enter the system through the EBD label, ever. It is one of the hard points that I refuse to nudge on at all. I will not budge on it. You are not emotionally behavior disturbed. That label is a criminalizing label. And I don't care if you're white, black, or purple. That label means that staff are going to write you off, and you are your experience as a student with EBD as a classification is very different than other health impairment. Emotional behavior disturbed, EBD, B as in boy.
Yeah. So, Adrian, you wanted to finish what you were saying real quick, and then we got one more person here. So let's go, Adrian. You were saying
one of my biggest problems with the classification differences is PDA specifies that it's an anxiety-based issue with demand, with having to do anything on request. It's anxiety based. But you know what ODD is? Do you know what they say it is? Any problem you have with authority with no basis. It has no actual basis in what is causing the problem. And I have a real big problem with that classification. Like, okay, so you have a problem with authority. Why? It doesn't ask why. It just says if you have a problem with authority. So why? Are you going to even question why? No, you're just going to give this label to a bunch of people of a specific classification, poor and brown, and I have a real big frickin' problem with that, because that is, as Dancing Puma said, they have designed this label to be a pipeline to you know where, and that's a problem.
Clink, clink.
So can I get into that then with what we're talking about with Mosh? With what you're saying with like affluent people are accessing this PDA diagnosis, because I have noticed more and more they are accessing it even for white boys with the same outward presentations as black and brown boys.
You damn right.
With the aggression, like they are now putting that label, and it's like, which is confusing because like that's not what PDA was originally profiled for. It was literally profiled against that.
Your advocacy, Oswin, is slightly different than mine because of the different spaces we occupy. And I want to make sure Sam Love gets to speak. I don't want to, and I have to go drive in like 5 minutes anyway. But I think your advocacy, Oswin, is very much like, hey, why are we separating out this from autism in general? For me, there's a utility in using the label of PDA and expanding it to black and brown children. Because there's, again, to Adrian's point, is there's something about seeing things as anxiety-based that humanizes the child versus problematizing and pathologizing the child. There's power in that, and schools, because of the advocacy of affluent families, now understand more and more and are hearing PDA more and more. And that's the only access point we have right now. I can't get on my high horse and be like, it's different. It's just not like that's actually going to make me less effective in school environments.
Right.
So I think you've seen my video on my concerns on mapping this onto white boys and not black and brown boys, and how black and brown boys are going to be the ones that end up being the repercussions of that once it becomes, once this gets into like the wider sphere of education and the political sphere.
No, I haven't seen that video, but I will tell you that I've gotten every single black boy on my caseload transitioned to an autism PDA classification in the school's mindset, and an autism classification or an OHI classification officially on their IEP. And that has changed their entire school experience. So it's like, I hear you on the catastrophizing. That is likely to be valid in reality, but also these are the tools that we have right now.
Right. All right. So
I don't disagree. And like, I understand all that. I like pushing things forward, and we know I do.
Yeah. All right. So